This is as good a time as any to try a little application of those urban models, or as you're going to see, maybe lack thereof application. Remember, Chicago was the original study city, especially for the concentric zone model and the sector model. Here's a quick reminder of how the concentric zone model works. If you look at A, that would have been zone number 1. We have a lot of vertical development, so the city is going up because the high cost of land, lots of services there, but at the same time, not a lot of residential density in the CBD, although this is probably the oldest part of the city, and it may very well have had a lot of people in it at one point. Then you can see B, which is zone number 2. This is where a lot of the industry would have been located, as in heavy industry, because the land was a little bit cheaper. To build a factory, you need a lot of space. At the same time, there would have been residences sprinkled in to some extent. And then you can see C, D, and E, which is zone number 3, zone number 4, and zone number 5. Those are all versions of suburbs or suburbia. Chicago was that original study city. I used to live in Chicago at one point early on in my career. Chicago, very cold in the winter, kind of a cool city in a lot of ways. Take a look at it, do a little urban geography analysis of it, and you can see that indeed the area I circled is the CBD, the Central Business District. Not a lot of residences here, but a lot of services. And you can even see over here on the left-hand side, there's a bit of sector development. You can see going along that one transportation corridor, a lot of vertically developed buildings. And then you can see out here in the distance, these are the suburbs. So this is what this was based on originally, both of those models, especially the concentric zone model and the sector model. This is Cleveland along Lake Erie. And you can see Cleveland on these maps in 1900, 1930, 1960, and 1990. All right, great analysis here. If you look in 1900 and you see where the CBD is, notice oldest part of the city, and in addition to that, densely populated. The darker the orange is, the more the number of people per square mile. So at that point, lots of people lived in that CBD. This is kind of pre-skyscraper era in a lot of ways. And you can also see that that light color, that kind of yellow color as you radiate outwards away from the CBD, that was probably actually mostly farmland at that point, okay? So all of that area there would have been very sparsely populated, not a lot of people per square mile. And now what happens? In 1930, you can see that the CBD begins to thin down in population, and the population increases as you move outwards away from the center part of the city, which I circled in purple. And you can see that what's happening is the population is radiating, moving outwards away from the center of the city. Now, the edges of the city are still largely very sparsely populated. Probably this is agricultural land that's slowly being converted into urban land, kind of the exurbs or the suburbs. You know, that would be ring number 5 in a lot of ways if we looked at it using the concentric zone model. Now look at 1960. In 1960, the CBD is nearly unoccupied. Very, very low population density. And what's happened is the population has moved outwards into the suburban area. And you can see stretching all the way out to the edges of the city. And in 1990, and again, 1990 is not recently, but this serves the purposes of understanding the way this works and the way it can be applied. 1990, the CBD is still largely unoccupied. But the edges of the city have also thinned out. And there's one band of population in that area that I just circled that's kind of dense, but the rest of the city, not very much. And what happened, of course, was because of deindustrialization, the loss of the United States industrial base, places like Cleveland lost population. There were both economic and environmental push factors. Environmental because during the winter it gets very cold. And a lot of snow too, with lake effect snow coming off of Lake Erie. And those people, that population, moved out to the south, to the west, and to the southwest of the United States. And you can see that furthest out ring has now gone back to being largely unpopulated or very sparsely populated. That is classic for what happened in cities in the upper Midwest of the United States, the so-called Rust Belt, that at one point was the manufacturing belt. If you want to know what Cleveland looks like, there it is. Kind of attractive in some ways. Some famous things there. Baseball stadium there. Football stadium there. Football team, baseball team there. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there. Cleveland rocks. You know what city this is? Go ahead and guess. You tell me. What city is it? Begins with a P. Paris. That's correct. You can see the Eiffel Tower there. Now, if you look in the distance, you can see La Défense. Now, is that the CBD? Is that the center of the city? Well, actually, this is the view of Paris from the center of the city, very near where Notre Dame Cathedral is at, right in the middle of the city, on the two islands that sit right in the middle of the Seine River. And you can see in the background the vertical development. Because in many cities in the world, because the cities are very old, they didn't just knock down the center of the city and then build vertically. The vertical structures are actually on the outskirts of the city, which is exactly what happened, for example, in Paris. And this area that I just circled, that's the center of the city. You can see that the buildings are, 4 to 6 stories high. I think in Paris there are even laws in the center of the city that only allow buildings to be a certain height. So that way they maintain the integrity of the architecture. Whereas out in the distance, you can see out over here where La Défense is at, you have this vertical development. And those are overwhelmingly services, insurances, banks, things like that. Whereas in the center, there's less of that kind of development. So Latin American cities present us with a very unique situation because, of course, Latin America went through the conquest where the Spanish, the Portuguese, and some others conquered that area from the indigenous people and then kind of had a tabula rasa to do whatever they wanted to do. I'm not saying this is good. I'm presenting it as fact, just as geographical, historical fact. And one of the things the Spanish did was, to most cities in Latin America, they applied what is commonly called the Spanish colonial grid system. And this is exactly what it is. It's a grid pattern. So north-south, east-west running streets that intersect at right angles. And typically, right in the middle of the city was a thing called the Plaza, a big open square. And you can imagine in this big open square, this is where all sorts of things happen. It's where protests happens. It's where big parties happen. It's where, for example, during the World Cup, big screens are put up so the town can come, the city can come and watch the World Cup all together. This is where markets happen. All of these things happen in the middle. It's a kind of version of one-stop shopping because the Spanish typically also put around the plaza, the very center of the city, the church, the government buildings, and then the major merchants. In other words, all the very important things for the Spanish conquest. So let's look at Mexico City, one of the great examples of this. This is an aerial view of Mexico City. And you can see right in the middle is the thing called the Zócalo, which is the plaza. Really, the Zócalo is this entire area here. If you got in a taxi in Mexico City and you ask them to take you to the Zócalo, they may take you almost to any place into here. They may not take you right to the square. It sort of depends, because the whole area is sort of referred to as the Zócalo. But the Zócalo is the plaza. And you can see that right there, that red arrow is pointing at the Metropolitan Cathedral of Mexico City, which sits right on the square. And then you can see the National Palace, which also sits right in the square, which is government buildings. And then around the rest of it, there's merchants and some other government buildings. And now notice the street pattern. It's a grid. North, south, east, west running streets. This is what it is. That's the grid pattern. This is what they developed. It's the most logical system in the world. How do you get to the plaza? 5 streets down, turn left, keep going, you can't miss it. I want to go to the Zócalo. How do I get there? 6 streets down, turn right, keep walking, you cannot miss it. It's like a perfect logical system. And of course in Los Angeles, if you fly over LA at night and you look down, you can see that a lot of Los Angeles is built along a grid pattern. Because of course, who founded us? That's correct. So the same system was applied here. Now if you look, many of you probably know that Mexico City is built on top of another city, Tenochtitlan, which was, for lack of a better term, the Aztec capital, the tripartite state. And if you look at this, this is in the Anthropology Museum in Mexico City. I advise you, if you go to Mexico City, please go to this museum. It's one of the great museums in the world. Even if you don't know a lot about the indigenous cultures of Mexico, you will learn a lot in a very short amount of time, and you don't have to be an expert to be able to pull this off. It's an awesome place. And if you look, those 2 arrows are pointing at, first of all, this on the top, the center of Tenochtitlan, which had an open square in it. And yes, it sat in a lake. The lake is long since drained, and Mexico City is sprawled out all over that. And then you can see on the bottom, this is what the center of the city looked like. That literally, where those pyramids are at, that literally is the same place as the Zócalo, the plaza in Mexico City. In fact, the main pyramid was where the church was at. And you can see this is an aerial view of exactly the same place. That central plaza is the Zócalo. And if you look, the city stretches out across the landscape. We do not have a lot of very tall buildings right in the middle of the city. And in fact, in Latin American cities, oftentimes the richer people live in the center of the city and the poorer people live out on the outskirts of the city in what's sometimes called slums or favelas, whatever term you want to use for this. But that's what it is, that the wealthier people tend to live close to the center of the city because that's where everything's going on in a Latin American city. Now, throughout the world, there are squares, plazas, place, piazze, namaste, all of these various kinds of things that all mean the same thing, which is this central square. If you look here, this is Česká Budějovice on the left-hand side and Trebon on the right-hand side. Both of these are in the Czech Republic. Clearly an open square. Typically what happens is the countries or the cities want these to be attractive places because so many things come into them. This is where, as I said, this is where the national parties or this city or urban parties happen. This is where the markets happen. This is where people gather for fun, to go eat and just look at the nice architecture and enjoy themselves and go for a walk. This is the Gemma El Fana in Marrakesh, Morocco. And you can see also, this is where a market happens every single night. Really great, exciting place. Food is sold there, juices are sold there, clothing is sold there, all sorts of wild things going on there. Very fun place. This is the Piazza del Duomo in Milan. You can see that this one is centered on a church. Once again, big open square. Tiananmen Square in Beijing, where some very famous anti-government protests happened back in 1989 that then the government absolutely smashed as hard as they could smash it to take control so that the communist government would remain in charge. That's Mao's tomb, that big square building that you see off in the distance. That is where Mao Zedong lies in state. You can go see him if you're there. I've seen him. Guess what this is? Go ahead, guess. That is Santa Ana College. We kind of have the same thing, a big open square. This is the plaza next to Olvera Street in Los Angeles. So this is a very common way to develop cities, have an open square in the middle. We do not have a lot of this in the United States. We tend to develop vertically in the center part of the city, but in many other places in the world, that concentric zone model, the sector model, these things don't apply nearly as well. They apply very well in American cities, but they don't work very well throughout the rest of the world.